Our housing problem solving strategies, this is more broadly what many CoCs are adopting around the country in terms of inserting a housing problem solving strategy into their continuum of care. And so housing problem solving can be done as part of homelessness prevention. That's the focus on category two households at risk of homelessness. And those conversations tend to focus on things like tenants' rights, financial counseling, and if one-time flexible assistance is needed for rent and utility assistance, security deposits, transportation, vehicle repairs, childcare, groceries, things like that, you're actually going to see that for the most part, the uses of temporary financial assistance used in CoCs around the country is identical whether you're trying to do housing problem solving to prevent homelessness, to divert people from needing to enter shelter or spending another night on the street, which is the second column, diversion, rapid resolution, or even using housing problem solving as a rapid exit strategy from emergency shelter. The nature of the conversations change, but for the most part, what we're trying to do again is find outcomes that help people stay with friends and family, return to a previous housing situation, whether or not that housing situation is in the Eastern PA CoC, and or finding a new temporary or permanent housing solution very quickly with one-time flexible assistance. You will note under diversion and rapid rehousing, I'm sorry, rapid resolution and rapid exit, that the one thing we've removed from eligible financial assistance is rent assistance. So when we're at the point of doing diversion or rapid exit, we're no longer trying to help people stay in their current lease. They've lost their lease at this point. So it's not utilized as rent assistance unless it's part of traditional homelessness prevention. And a specific grant in 2025 that the Eastern PA CoC is using for housing problem solving, and many of our CE access sites have this grant. Rent assistance is not an eligible use of this specific grant. There may be providers in our CoC that are doing diversion using their own temporary flexible assistance funding pool, and they may choose to do that how they wish. But the one limitation that we currently have in 2025 on our HPS grants is that we're not using them for rent assistance because the focus of our grant program is really this core column of diversion rapid resolution where households are already meeting the category one or four definition. If they're meeting the category two definition, we're still restricting usage so that they can't be used for rent assistance because we don't want this to be a rent assistance program, which can be very expensive, use the money very quickly, and we believe we have other strategies and funding sources for rent assistance or traditional homeless prevention. So this is really our core focus in the middle here, but we are allowing core entry access sites and specialists through the grant program to practice housing problem solving with households that meet the categories one, two, or four eligibility criteria as long as the funding, if needed, is not used for rent assistance. So how housing problem solving works at Court Entry in the Eastern PA CoC in 2025 is that we're asking Court Entry specialists to complete the CE project enrollment into the Category 1 and 4 project or into the Category 2 project, regardless of the outcome of the housing problem solving attempt. That's because we still need to document households that have presented at Court Entry in one of those situations. But if housing problem solving is attempted during the intake process and it is successful at any point during or after the CE intake and enrollment process, for example, housing problem solving can be attempted again when a head of household is contacting us to update their living situation or their family composition in an existing active CE enrollment. Housing problem solving can be attempted again. If it is successful at any point during a CE intake, enrollment, or update, then what we're asking CE specialists to do is to acknowledge that, but not never ever to delete the core entry intake. That should always be done, but instead, in addition to completing the intake, to either submit a by name list exit request form confirming that housing problem solving has been successful and the household is no longer in need of being enrolled in core entry, or if that form is not accessible or intuitive, to send an email with a specific subject line, client ID number, HPS successful, to one of the five regional managers in whatever region the core entry access site is in. And then there is specific methodology built within our client track PAHMIS system to document housing problem solving during these attempts. And, these are the basic steps for doing it, which is you'll note in our triage assessment for the category 1 and 4 enrollment, there is a question, is housing problem solving being attempted? Please answer that question as part of the workflow, but it doesn't automatically prompt you to do anything else other than to remind you that you're going to need to do a core entry intake note specifically for housing problem solving. If you answer yes, it's being attempted. This is a real basic form. We didn't want to. It's actually very cost prohibitive to build an even more customized way of tracking housing problem solving, which we hope to do in the future if this project continues as an ongoing program. But temporarily, even this prompt during the triage assessment is helpful for us to understand how often HPS is being attempted and how often that attempt, when we connect it with the data from our core entry intake notes, how often that attempt is successful. Please note that you must complete this entire triage page, including all the other required questions, before you can launch the CE intake notes. But when you are making a housing problem solving attempt after finishing the triage assessment screen, you should then go to the core entry intake notes, and there is a new note for HPS status. You will see there's a need to document the date of the attempt of housing problem solving, that there needs to be linked to the current active enrollment that you've just completed for housing problem solving, that you select the subject housing problem solving HPS, or you will not get all these other additional questions which don't exist in our other CE intake notes. And then the status options are successful, in progress, or unsuccessful. If you select in progress, that means you've made an attempt, and this is the most common status. You make an attempt, but it's not clear whether that attempt is going to work. That's why you've completed the entire enrollment. If we find out later that, and unfortunately, we can't always know for sure and track the attempt in progress, but the head of household may come back and report it's successful. You can then come in and update the CE intake note to successful, but we understand that most are going to say in progress or most are going to say unsuccessful. If you make an attempt, any notes you can provide in the open-ended dialog box would be very helpful as we analyze what is working in this process. You'll then note that if you select yes, the attempt was successful at core entry, then you will see a whole bunch of other questions open up. And we're going to ask, what is the outcome of this housing problem solving intervention? There are some very clear choices related to those outcomes I shared earlier, but there's also an other category, and you can write in an open-ended comment box if there's another successful outcome. And if you are utilizing any temporary financial assistance, documenting what specific assistance was provided, knowing that for our grant program, there is a cap per household on how much can be provided per year. But again, this data will help us understand where is flexible financial assistance needed most, and can we then, as a CoC, pursue funders either regionally or locally who may have an interest in just funding one of these things so that we can increase the amount of temporary assistance we have available. So those are the steps. You're going to create this customized intake note. We have our HMIS team has created a special report that we are using to report back to the core entry committee, the governing board, and the funder of this program. But again, if you're doing housing problem solving and you're not funded by this particular grant, we still would like you to utilize these features because it gives us more information on how often we're attempting housing problem solving, how often it's successful, for whom is it successful, if there are trends, and what, if any, financial assistance is needed for it to be successful. In our pilot in 2024, it was not always necessary. In fact, the majority of the time, our successful attempts did not require any flexible financial assistance. So the more data we have, the better. So the way you're documenting these attempts again in HMIS is first through the triage assessment question, is it being attempted? And then if yes, it is being attempted, adding this specific core entry intake note to the CE project enrollment after that enrollment is complete, either right after you save the triage assessment, is ideal because you can take the note right then and there, and then complete the enrollment by doing the hat for Cat 1 and 4. Or if you prefer, you can complete the hat enrollment, make the referrals to the client, and then come back and document this intake note right after that, hopefully not waiting any longer than that so that the information is still fresh in your mind. And that leads to finally, how does the housing problem solving attempt documentation work for Category 2 projects? It essentially works the same way. What we're asking core entry specialists to do is begin the Cat 2 enrollment, do the full Cat 2 enrollment. If a housing problem solving attempt is made, there is no triage assessment screen to ask that and answer that question. But what you can do is after the enrollment, go right to the core entry intake notes and do the housing problem solving note exactly the same way as you would do it for a category 1 or 4 enrollment. And you can always update those notes if the client is in touch with you after the attempt is made and it's in progress and you find out it's successful, at which point you should update the note. And because category 2 enrollments are not actually manually exited, they're auto exited. We don't need to have the step of submitting a by name list exit request on the Google form, nor emailing a core entry manager, but we are still documenting through the CE intake notes here, whether a category 2 HPS attempt was made and whether or not it was successful. I think one of the remaining questions practically is, again, we don't always know whether the attempt is going to be successful. This is our current system designed to capture as much information as we can on housing problem solving attempts during coordinated entry. But as we learn from this year's program, we will refine our HMIS coding and customizations. We will work to streamline it for core entry specialists to make it even easier to document housing problem solving, and we'll continue to do policy, procedural, and training updates for core entry specialists as we refine our work. So this is definitely a first year work in progress, this housing problem solving initiative, and we're asking for you as our both our call center and our access site specialists, whether you have a grant or not directly from the CoC, if you're attempting housing problem solving, to contribute to our data system in HMIS so that we can make it an even better strategy and initiative in the future, and also so that we can build a case for ongoing funding for housing problem solving at coordinated entry. For more information, please visit the Eastern PA CoC website, and specifically our coordinated entry web pages, or in PAHMIS production environment, there is a PAHMIS training folder that includes all of our links to all of our recorded trainings like this one, our policies and procedures manual, the slide decks from presentations like this one, and any other written documentation that we have officially that is for coordinated entry specialists.